What is up, guys? It has been a little while. And by a little while, I mean I've been away for a month, and I think you guys deserve an explanation. So, basically, a few months ago, my computer started kind of shutting off randomly, and I had no idea why. So, I just kind of decided to ignore it. Bad on me. And eventually, it just stopped turning on for a while. So it was coming on 5 years. There's no dust in the system, but I can think of a few reasons why it might have been, why it might have failed. The what happened was the motherboard actually stopped working. So this could have been because of a crack. This could have been because of multiple things. I had taken it off or out of the case about twice during those 5 years. Once to put the aftermarket CPU cooler on it, and can't remember what the other one but it was, but I know there was 2 times. So I may have tightened the screws a little bit too much on one of those times and it cracked something, whatever. Another reason could have been that I had a hard drive kind of hanging off the back, so that could have been putting pressure on the USB ports, which could have cracked something and short-circuited something and fried the board. Another thing that could have happened is my computer draws so much power that the breaker in the basement for my room does not actually give it enough power to use when it's using it at its full extent, so it tends to shut off, and that forced shut-offs usually sends like a shock or something. So I mean, I'm going to blame it on that because that happens probably about once a week. Anyway, so that was broken. So it took me about 5 days to get a new one. To get a new motherboard, a new CPU because I couldn't use the old CPU because of the socket, and I needed new RAM because I was running DDR3 and I needed DDR4. So that was $1,235, something around there. But I also bought an APC, which is a battery backup thing that you plug into the wall, and if the power does die, then you get so many minutes of extra power. So what I bought was I bought a 450 watt power supply, which usually would last 75 minutes. But because my system draws 1,000 watts, you got to cut that in a little bit less than half. So I'd probably, and then add the monitors, right, and add the mouse, the mouse and keyboard are plugged into the computer. So add the monitors. So I was probably only going to get about 15 to 20 minutes of power, but that's more than enough for me to run down to the basement, flip the breaker, and we'd be fine. On top of that, it does help with a little bit of power management, so hopefully that won't happen so often. It's been about a week now, and I haven't had one of these power fluctuations. I know I should have been uploading a little bit sooner, I'm sorry, but there were still things that I needed to do. Anyway, so after I put all the hardware in, I tried turning it on, and it wouldn't read my SSD. Now, this was partially my fault, partially not my fault. The part that was not my fault was that I didn't know that I had to change. Oh, I also bought a new power supply. That was the other thing, because I thought the power supply was shot. So I bought a new power supply first, and then it didn't work, and then I bought everything else. Anyway, so the SSD was still hooked up to the old cables for the old power supply. I don't know why that would have made a difference, but all of those were plugged in, and it didn't work. All I got to was just the BIOS. So that's the thing. And after that, what ended up happening was I ended up replacing all the cables, right? And it booted up, and that was fine. And then I spent probably 3-4 hours unplugging the SSD, plugging it back in, plugging it to an external box to see if I can get all the stuff out of it, plugging it into my laptop, which didn't work at all, and trying to get this stupid thing to boot. And I knew that it was running because when I plugged it into my box to see all the files, it ran, and I was able to drag and drop files and move files and whatever. So I couldn't for some reason, it wouldn't read it on my system. I thought I needed a recovery drive or whatever because the system knew that I was trying to open up Windows 7. But that could have just been stored files on my other hard drives that were telling it that. So after a long period of trial and error, I found out that I had actually forgotten to plug the power in. Not the power to the SSD, but the power into the power supply. I had plugged everything else into the power supply and everything else into the components that it needed, but I did not plug in the power to the SSD into the power supply. It was just plugged into the SSD, which does not work. Anyway, so I started that up, and it was fine, and it was great. And then a few other problems occurred over the past week, which is why I didn't upload any videos. That was, I needed drivers. Now, I only had 2 working USB ports, which was interesting because, well, there are, I think, 10? I think there's 10 or 12. And in my old rig, I think there was 14, and I was using 10 of them. So in this new rig, that's fine. But there were 4 USB 2s, and only 2 of them were working. Alright? And then I found out that the network card in my motherboard was different. Well, obviously it was different, but Norton actually, like the security system, actually goes through the IP or your MAC address in your network card. So when I swapped the network card, it was like, hold on, this is a new computer, this is not the account for that computer, and you don't have any protection. So as I was downloading drivers and surfing the web, I ended up getting a virus. Now, this virus did nothing at first, but it then ended up screwing up my scroll wheel. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have a scroll wheel, that sucks. Alright, but I started installing drivers. So I installed the drivers for my surround sound, I installed the drivers for the motherboard, I installed drivers for the USB, which didn't work at first. And that was because of the virus, but I didn't find that out until later. So I kept trying to install those USB drivers. I had to install, there were like 6 or 7 different drivers. And then after that, I was like, okay, time to get the Norton thing back on. So it didn't work because Norton had some corrupt files for whatever reason. So I uninstalled it. Big mistake. Because guess what? My mouse didn't work at all. So that was fun. So what I ended up doing is I ended up booting it up in safe mode. Mouse worked there. Installing Norton. And I probably could have run the security system, or I probably could have run Norton in safe mode, but I decided not to, and I decided to log back in, had no mouse. Norton was up though, and then tab and arrow key my way through the Norton menu to start a full system scan and have it automatically reboot, and then after that my mouse came back. Thank God. Now, my mouse wheel still didn't work, but I had gotten rid of 21 viruses, so that was great. Anyway, but everything else was working. The USB ports were working now, the mouse was working, keyboard working, all the drivers and everything on the system was working fine. And then after that, I ended up a day later getting a update for my mouse, which by the way is a Rocat Tyon, Tyon. If you guys are interested in looking up what kind of mouse I got, I got it on sale for about $90, so it's not a bad mouse. Not sponsored. Anyway, so yeah, I ended up doing that, and then when I got that update for the drivers for the mouse, the scroll wheel started working, so that was great. Now this left me with just one problem. For some reason, my computer would start shitting out and lagging out, and I've narrowed it down. I don't know why it does this, but I've narrowed it down to it does not like any color scheme for Windows other than the default. I don't know if you guys have tried to change like your personal settings and stuff, but if you don't, it's automatically set to default. But if you do, sometimes when you're running some games, you get that pop-up that says, would you like to switch it back to Windows 7 Basic color scheme? Right? For me, usually when that happened was only when I was playing Call of Duty, like, geez, I don't know, year and a half ago, right? And that would come up occasionally, but it never actually lagged my system. Now it just comes up completely at random, and it starts bogging the system down. My CPU doesn't run over anything more than like 20% when it's doing this, but it starts bogging down my system. I can't move the mouse hardly, or like I can hardly move the mouse. Everything starts lagging. It's just crap. I have to basically. Well, it took me a while to figure that if I just sat there and waited for 2 or 3 minutes, that it would actually come up and say, "Would you like to switch to Windows 7 Basic color scheme?" And I would do that, and then all of a sudden, all the lag would go away. Now this happens completely at random. So like sometimes I can run my computer at 5 hours and never have this problem occur. But other times, it just occurs right away. Like today, as I'm recording this video, the moment I started Tech at Legends, boom, I got huge lag spikes, and I had to wait. Other times, just starting Google Chrome, just starting Skype, just starting whatever, right? But it's always on the startup of a program. But it could be like the second program you start up or the 100th program that you start up. It's completely random, and I don't know what causes it. Either way, it's just something that I'm gonna have to live with for now. But yeah, that's the story. If you guys are interested, I got Corsair Vengeance 2666 megahertz RAM, DDR4, and I got a 6700K i7 processor, the newest one that's on the market, and my motherboard is a Maximus 8 Hero. All right, those are the new parts of my computer. I mean, other than the power supply, which is just a gold 1000-watt brand escapes me. It starts with an E. And then the APC. So yeah, that is my explanation for what's been going on over the past month or so. There will be a new video up tomorrow, I promise you. If not today, later on, but probably around midnight if that's going to be the case. But I'm back, everything is good, and we're about to have a lot more fun. Alright guys? So, with that done, I hope you guys have stuck with me through this month of zero content, and let's get back into it, alright?